Hi guys, Chris here, and today we're going to talk about hypothermia. And the context that we're talking about again is in that mountain environment. And like one of the hazards, I suppose, of going into a mountainous environment in bad weather is the risk of getting hypothermia. So today we're going to talk about, first of all, what is hypothermia? How does it happen on the mountain? What are the particular conditions on a mountain that are likely to bring about mild hypothermia, hopefully not progressing into more severe condition? All right. The next thing is, what are the symptoms? So how would you recognize if you had early stages of hypothermia or somebody in your party? All right. Next thing then is, how do you prevent it? All right. So prevention is better than cure, and it takes a huge amount of resources and effort to heat up the body again. So it's much better policy to stay at the core body temperature that you should be at to begin with. So don't get cold to begin with. So if you do have it, or somebody in your party has it, I suppose the next question is, how do we treat it? What do we do? So we're going to go through some basic first aid bits of kit that you should have with you that you can deploy, and how to use them properly. All right. So let's get straight into it. So the first question, I suppose, that we need to answer here is, what exactly is hypothermia, right? So that's hyperthermia, not hypo. So hyperthermia essentially is when your core body temperature starts to drop below its normal temperature of 37, all right? So 37 degrees centigrade is normal body temperature in your core, right? If that drops 2 degrees to 35, you have hypothermia, right? So there's different levels of hypothermia. So if it drops down to 35, 34, you've got mild to moderate hypothermia. The critical temperature is 32. Once it gets down to 32 or less, you're in a critical condition. So you can see that every degree drop really counts in this scenario, all right? So that's essentially what it is. And I suppose the next question is, why does your core body temperature drop in certain situations? It just means that the conditions you're in, wind, rain, cold, your clothes are wet, okay, the conditions you're in are just essentially sucking the heat out of your body, and your body just cannot generate and replace that heat quick enough. So what happens is, it's like a house. If you want to maintain a house at 20 degrees centigrade during the winter, if you don't turn up the heat and the outside temperature starts to drop rapidly, what's going to happen? The inside temperature of the house is going to it's going to reduce. All right. So it's the same with your body. You're trying to keep a constant temperature 37. If you're in a situation or conditions that pull that down, that's hypothermia. All right. So just a couple of stories. I suppose what I often think with these things is, particularly when we're new in a sport, or maybe when we start off in some endeavor, there's risks, and I suppose we all tend to kind of maybe think, this stuff happens to other people, all right? And it's like a lot of things in life, things happen, and they happen to lots of us, right? So one of them is, I would say, if you go out in bad weather in a mountain environment very frequently, eventually you're going to be in a situation where you're going to feel very, very cold. You may develop the early stages of hypothermia. So I know that it's happened to me 2 or 3 times, and I've also been in groups where it's happened to other people. All right. So one particular incident, it was around Christmas time. It was in Donegal, which is in the northern part of Ireland, and basically we were out in conditions about 3 to 4 degrees, very heavy rain, very heavy cold front rain, and very, very strong winds. All right. So we said, look, we knew the weather was bad, and we said that we wouldn't try anything too ambitious, but we set off on I think it was a 4 to 5 hour hill walk. We didn't anticipate any problems. Most of us had pretty good gear. 1 or 2 of the members had kind of average standard gear. So anyway, about 2 hours into the walk, and one person started to feel very, very cold. The rain penetrated the rain gear. They got wet. So that's the first thing. They got wet. They start to cool down very rapidly. They start to shiver. So look, we had the gear, we had the emergency shelter, we had some warm drinks, we got them in, we got them warmed up, and we got them off the mountain, and we aborted the walk. So like it does happen, all right. And I would definitely say the most critical conditions that you're going to be in the mountains would be when it's very windy, very cold, and it's very wet. Okay, so those three things, they are the most dangerous conditions to be in for a prolonged period of time. Okay, so that's basically what it is. So I suppose in a mountain environment, hypothermia, in my experience, or getting cold, it tends to creep up on you, all right? So as the day goes on and you're exposed to that wind and rain, your body just gradually cools. And a good tip, what I often do is, when you're halfway through that walk, put on that extra layer. You know, if your body has a good bit of sweat, if some rain is after getting in through your hood, after about 2 or 3 hours, get that extra insulation layer on, and bump up, bump up your layers and stay warm. All right. So remember, any kind of wetness or dampness, whether it's moisture, sweat, or the ingress of rain, that is going to cool you down. And the two parts of your body that are really critical to keep warm are your head, which loses up to 30% of your overall body heat, and obviously your chest and your core. All right. So that's basically the conditions. There's other things here that we need to think about is, before we start talking about proper clothing and that, is that when you set out to do a walk in the mountains, make sure that it matches your fitness level. All right. Because the thing about it is, when you go out in very windy, very wet, very, very challenging conditions, it's going to put an enormous strain on your body. And the energy required just to get from start to finish could be twice, 3 times what it would be normally in let's say, good conditions. So all I would say is, pick your route. If you decide that you're going to go out in bad weather, pick your route to suit. So that's not the day to do the big ambitious ridge walk, the 7-8 hour marathon walk. You know, pick something that's more manageable, maybe lower down. The other thing is just to be aware of your own level of fitness and your own level of physical capability. That like, for example, if the max you've ever done is 3 hours and climbed 1,500 feet, well then, a very, very wet, a very, very windy, a very, very cold day is not the day to go out and try that 5-6 hour marathon that you've had your eye on for a number of months. All right, so you need to be realistic about what your capability actually is. All right, so that's just a bit about how it happens on the mountain. It does tend to creep up, and there's other factors to consider here. You just need to have a sensible approach, right? So symptoms. So what would be the symptoms? How would you know if maybe yourself start to show early symptoms, or a member of the party that you're in? So the first thing is, you're going to feel cold. Let's just use a bit of common sense. You're going to start feeling very, very cold, and you're going to feel yourself getting even colder quite quickly. So that's the first thing. You'll know yourself, and often somebody, they're going to come and say, listen lads, I'm feeling very cold. I need to stop. We need to sort this out, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, your coordination tends to suffer. So be stumbling, maybe a little bit of speech impairment. But the big thing to watch there with people is sometimes their behavior and their mood changes. So they start getting grumpy, or maybe they start becoming introverted into themselves and not saying anything. So a change will come over the person. Shivering. So you start off shivering, which is, you normally associate that with being cold. And the thing about it is, if the condition is left untreated, that shivering will become uncontrollable. All right. So they're just some of the classic symptoms of hypothermia that you need to be watching out for yourself, and you need to be watching out for other people that you're with. All right. Now, the thing about it is, if this condition is not treated, and you do nothing, you will become severely hypothermic below 32 degrees core temperature. You will become unconscious and you will die. So that is the worst case scenario here. So it's very important that you monitor the symptoms, and when it's still mild, hop in there with high impact first aid and get it sorted out. So So far we've just looked at what is hypothermia, how does it creep up, how does it happen in that mountain environment, right? And what are the symptoms? So the next thing I suppose logically we need to look at is, you know, how do we prevent it? And as I said before, like the old saying, prevention is better than cure, because the amount of resources and effort it requires to heat up your body again is quite enormous, right? So you're better off trying to keep it where it should be in the first place. So the first thing is, and I've mentioned this already, is plan a sensible walk to match the conditions. Don't take on anything too challenging, because what happens is you're going to become exhausted, and then the reserves or the energy that your body needs to deal with the conditions is going to diminish. So the conditions are going to get on top of you and affect you negatively much quicker and much sooner. All right. As I said already, minimum time on the tops and the ridges in poor conditions. The other thing is, I would say, is to eat and drink frequently. So let's just repeat that, right? Eat and drink frequently. What do I mean by that? So I'm not talking about you do your 3 hour stuff for your lunch. I'm talking about snacking, all right? Snacking at least once an hour in poor conditions, because the thing about it is your energy consumption really goes up if you're in very severe wind chill, if you're in wet, windy, difficult conditions. So let's just break this down, what the energy is needed. So the first thing is, you got your base metabolic rate. So you just need basic energy level just to breathe, just for your organs to work. Just for me standing here, I'm at a base metabolic rate, just to be here, right? When you're in a mountain environment, the next thing then is the extra energy to do the physical work, to walk up the hill, to carry your pack, to walk over rough ground. So the third element that we're talking about here in poor conditions, whether it's very cold, very wet, very windy, right, is the next layer of another layer of energy just to overcome those conditions and keep your body warm. So especially when you're operating in very, very cold conditions, all right, your body is going to need a lot more calories just to maintain its core temperature. So we got base metabolic rate. We need energy to actually do the activity. Now the third one is, we need energy to overcome the conditions and to stay warm. All right. So you can see there, especially if you're a big person, a muscular person, the amount of calories you're burning is enormous. So all I'm saying is, my rule is snack on at least on the hour. So get some nuts into you, you know, get a bar into you, but keep it coming, and don't run out of glycogen in your muscles. The other thing I'd say is, you know, reduce the overall exposure time. So what I have found is that, you know, you can go out there for 2 or 3 hours, you're feeling a bit cold when you finish, that's fine. But if you extend that to 6 hours without taking shelter maybe halfway through, you know, getting into your bothy bag, getting him into a sheltered forest, and just sort of let your body recover a bit, your body temperature does gradually drift downwards over a very long cold day. So that's just something to watch, all right? The other thing I'd say about staying warm is, and this makes a lot of sense, is keep moving, because movement, activity, work generates an enormous amount of body heat, and that is the main heat. I know you have your layers, but that body heat is the main thing that's keeping you warm, all right? So I would say, don't be stopping for those long lunches, keep moving, all right? So just again on the prevention side, just a couple of things with the clothing, and I have another video that goes through clothing, so I'm just going to fly through this. But the most important thing to have on you is a hard shell, right? So they're your trousers. These are Gore-Tex over trousers, waterproof, windproof, etc., right? So don't forget the legs, right? And it's a good idea as well to, you know, spray these with a boost of repellency every now and again, so that when you do go out on very, very wet, windy days, that these things are actually going to work, all right? So hard shell trousers. The next thing then is a really good hard shell jacket, one that is not going to let you down. So again, in another video I've gone through the details of this. This is a North Face hard shell that I use, and it's waterproof, it's windproof, etc. So what I would say is, if you do decide to go out into poor conditions, make sure you have the gear, because if you have cheap rain gear, you're going to get wet and you're going to get very cold, and you're potentially going to put yourself in a dangerous situation. So I've seen that before, where people go out, cheap rain gear, anoraks, go out in wind and rain. After an hour, they're soaked, they're getting cold, and then we have to abandon the walk and get back down, right? So, you know, I would say hard shell, very, very important, right? The other thing then is, what do you wear under the hard shell? Now, what you always have to assume is, in wet, windy conditions, if you're out long enough, doesn't matter how good the jacket is, you want to allow for a certain amount of rain getting in, and it does get in through the hood, it gets up the cuffs, spreads by capillary action, etc. So the material that you should be wearing under your hard shell in wet conditions is merino wool. So this one here, that's my base layer, merino wool. I think it's nearly 100%. I tried to find the label, I think I cut the label off, but I think it's at least 80% merino wool. So very, very high quality base layer. And the thing about that is, even if it gets wet, it'll still keep you warm, all right? Another merino wool, this is just an ordinary jumper, but it's actually 100% merino wool. It's quite thin. Again, worn over the base layer as a mid layer. Merino wool, when wet, it'll still keep you warm, all right? Now, the next thing you're probably going to need on in those wet, windy conditions, cold conditions, is some sort of insulation there. Now, this is just it's a windproof fleece type jacket that would go under my hard shell, and I've used this and it's very, very effective. What I'm looking at the moment is I'm trying to source a really good insulation layer merino wool, so I'll have a complete merino wool system. So I'll let you know how we get on with that. But the thing about it is, especially if it's raining and it's windy, do not underestimate the amount of insulation that you're going to need on your hard shell. That is a big mistake, and I've made it. Don't dress too light. You will get cold if you dress too light, all right? So that's just... Now, the other thing about it is your head. Make sure you wear a really good cap. 2 caps here. This is a really warm one, comes down over the ears. This is a more simple one, just a sort of a roundy one, like a beanie. But the point about it is, as I say, up to 30% of your body heat is through your head. Wear something on your head that will keep you warm, but also if some amount of rain gets in and you get wet, these items here will still keep you warm, all right? What you do not wear is on your head is one of these cotton things, okay? Cotton will kill you. Cotton will kill you, right? Cotton jumpers, cotton tops, cotton hats, they get wet, they retain the heat, and they rapidly cool your body down. So don't wear anything that has cotton in it. As I've mentioned already, on the prevention side, snack regularly, have a bar once an hour, you know, keep some nuts in your pocket, keep snacking, keep the energy up, because you're working really hard, your body's under huge pressure to try and maintain their core temperature of 37. So that's just a few words about preventing it, let's say, on the walk, by the way you dress, the type of things you wear, and of course drinking and snacking very frequently, all right? So the next thing then we're going to talk about is, if you recognize the early symptoms of hypothermia in yourself or a member of your party, what do you do? So let's talk about treatment. So the first thing, the first step, what we got to do here is we got to find some sort of shelter, okay? Now, we're on a mountain, there is no shelter, so any shelter that we're going to avail of has to be carried. So the first thing is, you should always carry some sort of an emergency shelter, or this thing is called a bothy bag. Now, it's made by Vango. This one takes up to 4 people. Obviously, if you're doing a solo walk, you might take a smaller one, maybe for 2 people. But I don't go, I always carry this. So this is my go-to. So shelter. So let's have a quick look at this bit of kit. Highly recommend this kit. Highly, highly recommend this. All right. So all it is, it's really just a tent without poles, right? And it's some sort of PVC, waterproof, windproof material, like what you get in a tent. It's got a little window, all right? The little window that you can look out. And basically the whole idea is that you just put it over yourself, like so, okay? You cinch you cinch the bottom part has a draw cord, you cinch in the bottom and you create a bubble, and it traps a whole body of air, all right? So it's like being in a tent. So the first thing what you're doing there is no wind chill. So the wind is gone, no rain, no precipitation. You trap a body of air, the people inside it, the body heat, the temperature inside the bag, or the let's call it shelter, will start to rise, all right? So that's step number one, and that will have a huge impact. That will have a huge and an immediate impact. So that's your emergency shelter, right? Always carry one. Another thing you can carry is what's known as a survival bag. And these things are just like a big, huge, heavy-duty refuse sack, right? And the whole idea is, emergency situation or someone has hypothermia, you put them into this. One way to treat someone that's getting very cold, you could put a second person in there so they can heat with the other person's body heat beside them. All right, that can be very effective, right? So, so that's it. It's just a big plastic bag, not very comfortable. A lot of condensation will build up in it, but it could save your life. I remember when I was in the military, we would never go out on an exercise in the mountains without carrying one of these things. All right, very cheap, very light, very easy to carry, but very, very good piece of kit. Another thing I have here is a space blanket, and these things are just really just an aluminium type blanket, very, very light, and you just wrap yourself around it, and because it's got such a high conductivity, it'll just prevent further body heat loss from escaping from you. So the whole idea is you wrap yourself or the patient up in one of these things. So again, very small, very light, very easy to carry. So I'm not saying that you're going to carry 5 or 6 pieces of kit to deal with hypothermia, but I definitely say always carry a shelter, and maybe the bivy bag, but certainly carry one of these as well. So I would say 2 of the 3 items. All right. So that's critical. Number 1 is to take shelter, get out of the wind and the rain. The next thing then is if your clothes are wet, all right. You need to not obviously it's not practical to change all of your clothing, but what I do is, especially if I go out in wet and windy conditions, I bring some spare clothing, right? So the key things are I have a spare base layer and a spare mid layer, okay? Because that will have a huge impact. Remember, most of the body heat is going to be from the head and from the torso. So change the clothes for the torso, base layer, mid layer, high impact, make a huge difference, right? Again, staying on the torso, I always carry a really effective mountain emergency type jacket. Now this is a belay jacket that I used to use when I was a technical climber. The whole idea is when you're belaying, you're very stationary. You could be there for half an hour, 40 minutes, depending on the pitch that's being climbed. Pop this on, and when it's your turn to climb, you take it off, put it in your haversack. But I always carry it. It's seldom ever wear it on when I'm actually moving on a walk. But this thing, if anything happened that I went static, I'll be putting this thing on to raise my body temperature. All right. Again, hood, synthetic. Do not go for feather down. Okay. You want a synthetic, because the reason is feather down gets wet, it loses a lot of its insulation properties and it starts to clump. Synthetic is your man. All right. So again, raise body temperature. You put your warm coat on. The other thing then is just on the head. What I do is, and I said this before, always for emergency kit, if you're going to carry it, make sure it's high impact. So I've got a really thick balaclava here that I'm going to put on if I felt myself getting mildly hypothermic. This is the gear I'm going to put on inside that emergency tent. I'm going to have some warm drinks. I'm going to get myself sorted out, and I'm going to get down off the mountain. All right. So, so again, heavy, piece of headgear there that's going to keep you really warm. Finally, then on the hands, I carry some spare gloves. So the thing about gloves is mitts are always going to be warmer than gloves. So just remember that. So these are really thick, warm pair of mitts, and I have a very small liner. And the reason I carry the liner is that they're very light, don't take up extra space, but for the maximum impact, put on the liner, and then I can pop my hand in here. All right. And again, I'm trying to reduce as much, I'm trying to conserve as much body heat as I possibly can in all parts of my body. All right. So again, dry kit. So really what we're saying is I'm not saying carry a complete set of change of clothing, right? That's not practical. But what I am saying is, especially when you go out in the winter in poor conditions, you want to have a contingency kit that's kept dry and it's only taken out for emergency situations. So again, just to recap, what I tend to bring, I always have a spare pair of socks. I bring a spare base layer, a spare mid layer. I have my heavy emergency coat. I have some spare gloves or mitts, and I have a spare hat. Okay. Get into the shelter, your body will start recovering pretty fast after wearing that gear, all right? The other thing is just, winter warm drink. So this is a godsend, it's for morale, for warming you up, emergency situation, hot water. That's about, I think, about 3/4 of a litre of hot water. What I would tend to do is maybe halfway through the walk, normal day, I would have one of these and I keep maybe 2 cups in reserve. All right, keep 2 cups in reserve. Hot drink, noodles, emergency, cup of soup, anything like that. All right, anything like that, little OXO cube, that will have an enormous impact if you have mild hypothermia, both physiologically and psychologically. And there's a psychological aspect to this as well. All we're trying to do here is, if someone is mildly hypothermic, is to take that immediate action, restore their bodily warmth, restore their morale, and just get down off the mountain by the shortest route possible. So again, warm food, very, very high impact when you're rendering first aid for mild hypothermia. And again, what I would say is, just always keep a small reserve pack of food, just in case you got caught out. Just another tip. I seal it up in a bag here so that I don't plunder it under normal walking conditions. It's preserved as emergency. Okay, so guys, that's probably about it. Today, just to recap, we spoke about hypothermia. First of all, what is it? Okay, how does it get a hold of you in a mountain environment? We said that it creeps up on you. We mentioned how to prevent it. Okay, we went through how to treat, what are the symptoms, and of course, if you find yourself in that situation, how do you actually treat it? So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. By way of looking forward, we'll be doing more of these type of videos on different subjects. Again, it's all about competency and safety in that mountain environment. So whether you're a hill walker, you're a mountaineer, you're a hill runner, whatever, the point about it is we want to go out and enjoy the activity safely. There is always a certain amount of risk that we cannot remove, and we just need to know what to do and have certain contingencies prepared in the event of something going wrong. So the only thing I'd ask you to do is press the like button, subscribe, forward on the video to other people that you might think have an interest, and of course leave any comments that you want below. So that's it, guys. Until the next time, stay safe.